From gulping down squirrel soup to polishing off marshmallow-topped sweet potatoes to ordering jelly beans by the ton, U.S. presidents have always had comfort foods as unique as their personalities. Some picks are classy, some are purely practical, and a few are so odd you'll wonder how the Secret Service didn't stage an intervention. Food, after all, is the one part of power that stays human. Even the most famous leaders still crave the tastes that remind them of home, childhood, or survival. So let's race through the early presidents and their favorite bites, one strange craving at a time. We start where the country starts, George Washington. Every morning at Mount Vernon, Washington had a ritual. He ate hoecakes, simple cornmeal pancakes that were common in colonial kitchens. According to his step-granddaughter, he downed 3 small cakes a day, each soaked in butter and honey. But this wasn't only a sweet tooth thing. Washington's teeth were in rough shape and chewing was a chore. Soft hoecakes were easy to swallow, so breakfast was both comfort and necessity. Think of it less as a treat and more as a clever workaround for a man who still had a nation to run before lunch. Next comes John Adams, and the man basically ran on apples. Like plenty of New Englanders of his era, Adams started his day with hard cider, yes, at breakfast. To him, it was as normal as coffee is to us. And if that weren't enough apple energy, his favorite dessert was apple pandowdy, a baked pudding of apples, molasses, and warm spices. Morning cider, evening pandowdy. Adams wasn't just the second president, he was America's first unofficial apple evangelist. Thomas Jefferson took a different road, carbs and cheese. While serving as U.S. minister in France, he fell hard for macaroni and parmesan. He didn't just enjoy it, he studied it, then hauled the obsession back to Virginia along with a pasta machine. In 1802, he served guests at the White House a baked macaroni pie, basically an early mac and cheese gratin. For Americans who'd never seen anything like it, it was a culinary shockwave. Jefferson even wrote out careful recipes for creamy macaroni puddings. In another life, he would have been the guy filming recipe reels in Monticello. James Madison is tougher to read because he kept his private life quiet. But Dolly Madison made sure the Madison years had a signature flavor, ice cream. She served it at White House gatherings in then exotic styles like strawberry and apricot. People later claimed she offered oyster ice cream too, but that story's almost certainly a myth. Either way, Dolly's parties made ice cream a national craze. The Madisons even built an ice house to keep supplies cold, and rivals joked that the president cared more about Dolly's desserts than the nation's business. Honestly, if you had an endless ice cream pipeline in the 1810s, you might get distracted too. James Monroe's favorite was spoon bread, a soft, custardy cornmeal casserole you could scoop with a spoon. At his Virginia plantation, it showed up constantly, often next to fried chicken or ham. It was humble, warm, and local, Monroe's version of a home state hug and a reminder that American cooking could be simple yet elegant. John Quincy Adams didn't chase richness at all. He preferred fruit, apples, pears, plums, whatever was in season. He expanded the White House grounds with gardens and orchards, so visitors hoping for lavish feasts sometimes got a plate of fresh produce instead. It was health food diplomacy long before Cale had a PR team, and it fit his personality. Disciplined, practical, maybe a little too serious for people who wanted fireworks with dinner. Andrew Jackson ate like the frontier tough guy he was. His favorite dish was leather breeches, green beans dried for storage, then simmered slowly with bacon. Salty, smoky, chewy food that matched a hard life. He also enjoyed hickory nut soup and fried apple pies, but leather breeches was pure Jackson, sturdy, stubborn, and built to last. Martin Van Buren pivoted from the farm to the sea. He loved oysters, raw, baked, stewed, tossed into soups, any way you could serve them. Growing up in New York, oysters were cheap street food, so in the White House he often skipped pastries and made a beeline for the shellfish. He even joked you could judge a dinner by how many shells piled under the table. If that's your metric, Van Buren hosted some legendary nights. William Henry Harrison's taste was straight frontier, squirrel stew. During his 1840 campaign, rallies handed out free squirrel stew with cornbread and cider to prove he was a log cabin man, not a silk glove aristocrat. The food was a campaign slogan in a bowl, one of you and I eat what you eat. It wasn't fancy, but it was the kind of meal that told voters he understood their world. John Tyler leaned sweet and practical with Indian pudding, a baked mix of cornmeal, milk, and molasses spiced and slow-cooked until comforting. With 15 kids in the house, it also made sense. One big pan could feed a small army. In Tyler's world, dessert wasn't decoration, it was logistics. James K. Polk stuck to corn in its simplest form. Raised in the South, he preferred cornbread, corn pones, and ash cakes baked in hot coals. Polk wasn't dazzled by banquet food. He wanted the taste of home, plain and reliable, the kind of thing you eat after work when you're too tired to care about fancy table manners. Zachary Taylor picked up his favorite while stationed around New Orleans. He adored challahs, Creole rice fritters sold by French Quarter vendors, usually eaten hot in the morning with strong coffee. When he became president, he brought challahs with him, turning a local street snack into a White House treat. It's the classic, I tried something amazing on the road and I'm never letting it go move. Millard Fillmore liked soup, particularly mock turtle soup. The twist: it wasn't turtle at all, it was typically made from calf's head, seasoned to imitate expensive green turtle soup popular in Victorian high society. Strange to us, fancy to them. Fillmore loved it enough to install the first proper stove in the White House kitchen to make soup prep easier. When your favorite meal requires a whole kitchen upgrade, that's commitment. Franklin Pierce's comfort food was much easier to cheer for fried clams. Crispy, golden, salty New England goodness. Pair them with chowder and Pierce was set. Sometimes the simplest cravings are the most relatable, and Pierce's taste felt like a summer shoreline captured on a plate. James Buchanan, the only U.S. president who never married, had a culinary soulmate anyway: cabbage. Sauerkraut, coleslaw, buttered cabbage. If it was leafy and green, he was in. Not everyone's dream dinner guest, but at least the man was consistent. You knew what you were getting when Buchanan sat down at the table. Abraham Lincoln's favorite was bacon. From his frontier childhood through long White House nights, bacon was his steady companion. During the Civil War, he even shared bacon rations around campfires with soldiers, eating shoulder to shoulder with the troops. It wasn't just food, it was symbolism, an everyday flavor that said, "I'm still one of you," even while he carried the weight of the country. Andrew Johnson took comfort in hoppin', John, black-eyed peas, and rice simmered with pork. It was a Southern New Year's tradition thought to bring luck and prosperity, two things Johnson could have used more of. After surviving impeachment by a single vote, he probably kept that bowl close like a charm you can eat with a spoon. Ulysses S. Grant didn't eat for luck, he ate for calm. His favorite was rice pudding, a gentle, simple dessert. Years of war had wrecked his stomach, so while guests dined on rich French menus, Grant often headed straight for the homemade pudding his wife Julia made. In a way, it was his quiet reset button after a lifetime of stress and hard living. Rutherford B. Hayes also clung to a frontier favorite: cornmeal flapjacks drenched in molasses. Even during the Civil War, he wrote home about missing them. As president, he didn't swap them for European crepes to impress visitors. He served what he loved because to Hayes that was the taste of real America: humble ingredients, big warmth, zero pretension. James Garfield grew up poor on the Ohio frontier, and his favorite stayed stubbornly humble: squirrel soup. It wasn't a novelty to him, it was what powered his childhood. Friends later remembered him enjoying it back on his farm, with his wife Lucretia keeping the recipe alive. Some cravings don't disappear just because you move into a mansion. Chester A. Arthur, however, brought a little New York swagger. He was famous for grand dinners and even grander mutton chop sideburns, and fittingly his favorite dish was mutton chops. When he sat down to eat, he'd ignore the fancy spread and zero in on thick chops with baked potatoes. Waiters reportedly didn't bother asking what he wanted. Arthur's usual was set in stone, city slicker comfort in a presidential dining room. Finally, Grover Cleveland kept it working class. His go-to snack was pickled herring, sharp, salty, vinegary, often paired with Swiss cheese and a beer. His wife Frances said he was happiest not in glittering banquets but in the kitchen with his herring and cheese, enjoying life in the simplest way possible, like a man who never forgot where he came from. And that's the early presidential menu: a mix of necessity, nostalgia, regional pride, and a few truly baffling habits. More than anything, it shows that history isn't only made in wars and speeches, it's also made at breakfast tables and late-night kitchens. If these were only the warm-up acts, just wait until the later presidents, because the food gets richer, stranger, and somehow even more American from here. Once America moved past its early generations of presidents, the nation stepped into an era where regional tastes, expanding food culture, and personal quirks shaped White House dining in some unforgettable ways. Some presidents held on to the humble flavors of their upbringing, while others introduced dishes so unusual that historians still raise their eyebrows. From corn devotion to candy obsession, this next batch of presidents proves that food tells its own version of American history, sometimes comforting, sometimes chaotic, always revealing. We begin with Benjamin Harrison, a man whose loyalty to corn was almost ceremonial. Growing up in Indiana meant living with cornfields stretching across the horizon like an ocean of golden stalks. It was in his blood, part nostalgia, part regional pride, part identity. So when Harrison took his place in the White House, he didn't leave that corn-soaked upbringing behind. Corn wasn't just a vegetable to him, it was practically a love language. He ate it roasted, baked into puddings, fried into crisp fritters, and stirred into hearty chowders. Even state dinners reflected this devotion: elegant guests, fine china, and right in the center, steaming bowls of corn chowder. Some presidents tried to impress foreign diplomats with French sauces and refined imported dishes, not Harrison. He impressed them with the taste of home, only slightly polished with presidential flair. For him, corn wasn't just food. It was heritage on a spoon, a bite of Indiana served at the nation's highest table. After Harrison's corn crusade came William McKinley, who brought a more indulgent favorite into the spotlight: hot lobster salad. Unlike modern salads, this was a warm, creamy baked casserole-style dish made with tender pieces of lobster folded into a velvety sauce. McKinley and his wife Ida adored it so much that they served it at their 25th wedding anniversary. And once the recipe reached the White House, high society took notice. Restaurants across the country briefly served a dish proudly called lobster a la McKinley. When a president's favorite meal inspires a temporary culinary trend, you know the obsession was real. It wasn't just comfort food for him, it was a signature dish, a mark of status, a small luxury in an era that was rapidly transforming into the modern industrial America. But luxury was not the theme when Theodore Roosevelt entered the picture. Teddy ate with the appetite and intensity he brought to every part of his life. His diet was pure frontier boldness, thick steaks, wild game, roasted fowl, and even bear meat. He hunted much of his own food, believing that a strong body created a strong mind and nation. French diplomats complained endlessly about White House meals under Roosevelt. Too much meat, they said, not enough elegance. But Teddy wasn't cooking to impress them. He was fueling himself for endless tasks. Speeches, negotiations, horseback rides, boxing matches, and the general act of living life at full volume. He had strict rules for how food should be cooked. Fried chicken drenched in gravy, steaks thick and dripping with juice, and wild game roasted simply but heartily. In many ways, Roosevelt was the White House's unofficial head chef. His energy set the tone for the table and the country. That boldness paved the way for William Howard Taft, a man whose appetite was as historic as his presidency. Taft didn't merely enjoy steak and potatoes, he embraced them with legendary dedication. Breakfast for him often meant a 12-ounce steak. Lunch, another serving of hearty meat. Dinner, you guessed it, something carved, sliced, or roasted. He even hosted what became known as presidential breakfasts, where senators joined him for steak and eggs at the break of dawn. These meals were partly camaraderie, partly political strategy, and partly an expression of Taft's genuine delight in hearty food. Over time, though, endless feasts took a toll, and his weight soared above 300 pounds. His health eventually forced him to scale back, proving that even presidents must eventually bow to biology. But in his prime, Taft's table was a monument to rich American comfort food. In sharp contrast came Woodrow Wilson, whose sensitive stomach shaped one of the plainest presidential diets in history. While others indulged in massive steaks or buttery casseroles, Wilson stayed loyal to simple chicken salad, mild, soft, and easy on digestion. His meals were straightforward and predictable, usually eaten quietly at his desk while working through mountains of paperwork. He once joked that his favorite dishes were anything that requires the least chewing, a statement so perfectly Wilson that historians still chuckle. In an age of global conflict, economic upheaval, and political complexity, Wilson found stability in food that never argued back. Then came Warren G. Harding, a man who needed comfort and found it in chicken pot pie. Harding's front porch campaign in Ohio drew thousands of supporters, all gathering around his home. His wife Florence often prepared fresh chicken pot pie for visitors, turning a familiar family recipe into a symbol of warmth and stability. Harding's political career may have collapsed under the weight of scandals, but one thing remained consistent: his devotion to that warm, flaky, creamy dish. No matter how chaotic the world became, chicken pot pie was a reliable anchor. Calvin Coolidge found his culinary joy in apple pie, but not just any apple pie. His favorite came from his Vermont upbringing, a traditional pie made with apples, warm spices, and thin strips of salt pork layered inside. Coolidge said he never tasted anything better than his mother's pork apple pie, and unlike most people, he didn't limit it to dessert. Breakfast, pie; supper, pie; midnight snack, pie. If Coolidge opened the fridge and saw pie, it was already halfway gone. His devotion was so constant that White House staff simply made sure some version of apple pie was always available. Herbert Hoover, often remembered for the Great Depression, had a surprising sweet side. His comfort dish was baked sweet potatoes topped with melted marshmallows, a warm, sugary, nostalgic treat. During the Depression, this dish caught on nationwide because it was affordable yet felt like a celebration. Hoover's preference revealed a softer personality beneath the hard economic memories associated with his presidency. Franklin Delano Roosevelt took comfort in something far simpler and universally loved: grilled cheese. For a man who hosted world leaders, kings, and prime ministers, his favorite meal remained melted American cheese on crunchy toasted bread, often paired with tomato soup. If someone can win 4 presidential elections while eating grilled cheese, it proves simple pleasures never lose their power. Harry Truman was as straightforward with food as he was with words. He insisted that steaks be cooked well done, joking that only coyotes eat their meat with pink inside. His plate almost always included a baked potato and a glass of milk. Truman didn't care about elaborate meals, he wanted assurance that everything was cooked, safe, and predictable. In a world full of political surprises, dinner was one area where he demanded complete control. Dwight Eisenhower, a 5-star general, had a major weakness for sweets, especially million-dollar fudge. Made with chocolate, marshmallow cream, and walnuts, it became a White House Christmas staple thanks to his wife Mamie. The recipe became so iconic it spread through newspapers, holiday cards, and fan letters. Ike loved the dessert so much that it practically became the unofficial candy of the 1950s. John F. Kennedy embraced the flavors of his Massachusetts childhood. His favorite was New England fish chowder, creamy, cozy, and filled with potatoes and fresh fish. He ate it often, and when a young girl wrote asking what meal he liked best, Kennedy personally mailed her the recipe. It was a small gesture that showcased his warmth and connection to the public. Lyndon B. Johnson brought Texas fire to Washington. His White House became a stage for barbecue diplomacy. At his Stonewall Ranch, he hosted world leaders with smoked brisket, ribs, and his signature spicy chili. His wife Lady Bird even published the family's chili recipe and distributed it through the White House. LBJ believed barbecue wasn't just food, it was a statement about American boldness. Richard Nixon took a more peculiar route. His go-to comfort food, cottage cheese topped with ketchup. It sounds bizarre, but he ate it constantly on airplanes during late-night work sessions and even on his final day in office after resigning. It was simple, fast, and comforting in its own odd way. Gerald Ford stuck to Midwest classics, Sunday pot roast followed by butter pecan ice cream. These flavors grounded him, reminding him of family dinners and everyday comforts. Even amid political storms, the White House freezer always made room for butter pecan. Jimmy Carter craved something even more humble, cheese grits with eggs. He ate them so often that he even named his dog Grits. It wasn't just breakfast, it was a personal signature, a reminder of Georgia mornings and childhood routines. Ronald Reagan, on the other hand, transformed the White House into a jelly bean wonderland. His favorite candy became a symbol of his presidency. Jars of Jelly Belly beans sat in cabinet meetings, on Air Force One, and at press briefings. For his inauguration, 3.5 tons of patriotic-colored jelly beans were shipped in. At some point, the West Wing was practically scented with sugar. George H.W. Bush kept things salty and spicy with pork rinds splashed with Tabasco. After he praised them publicly, pork rind sales skyrocketed, but he earned equal fame for his hatred of broccoli. "I'm not eating any more broccoli," he declared, banning it from Air Force One, and that was that. Bill Clinton returned to hearty comfort food with his love of cheeseburgers, especially jalapeno-loaded ones. Secret Service agents often grabbed drive-through orders to keep up with his cravings. Even after heart surgery led him toward a vegan diet, Clinton admitted he still dreamed of a good messy burger. George W. Bush introduced an unusual hybrid, cheeseburger pizza. Picture everything in a burger: beef, onions, pickles, mustard, spread over pizza crust. It became the official snack of movie nights and football Sundays at Camp David. Barack Obama kept a clean public image, but eventually confessed that nachos were his weakness. Fully loaded, cheesy, crunchy nachos became a staple at March Madness watch parties in the White House theater. Donald Trump leaned into fast food, Big Macs, fried chicken buckets, and Diet Coke. He ordered hundreds of fast food items to serve championship athletes, turning the East Room into a buffet line of familiar American brands. Joe Biden, meanwhile, became synonymous with ice cream, especially chocolate chip. He's been spotted at countless ice cream parlors, cone in hand, with a smile that says dessert is diplomacy. By the time you reach the end of this culinary timeline, you begin to see a pattern. Presidents are human first, leaders second. Their favorite foods reveal their backgrounds, cultures, comforts, and contradictions. Some choices are refined, some are rustic, and some are downright baffling. But each dish, whether it's lobster salad or nachos or cottage cheese with ketchup, tells a story about the man who sat behind the resolute desk. And if strange snacks made you raise an eyebrow, just wait, because next comes the darker side of presidential history, the decisions, disasters, and missteps that reshaped America in ways food never could. The kitchen stories are over. Now the real shock begins.